Hi, I'm Ann Charles.
I'm Keith Ghostland.
I'm Linda Quinlan, and welcome to All Things LGBTQ. Today is Tuesday, March 7th, and we're taping on what we know is Indigenous land, unceded Indigenous land, and hope you enjoyed the show.
And that you voted for town meeting day.
Yes. Ann, what do you have on?
I have a lot of international news.
Are you going by continents or?
Well, I'm starting with, I chose to include this story under the world, although it irritates me to cover it, but it's about the Anglican leaders whom I mentioned last
them
time.
again.
And 10 of them have rejected the Archbishop of Canterbury after he made that same-sex marriage decision, which is no marriage, but you can have a blessing. So 10 of its districts say, forget that, we renounce you, Archbishop of Canterbury. So I can cover that a little more. It comes up specifically in my Uganda coverage. But
the 5 who are renouncing him, they want full marriage or they want nothing?
it's 10 and they want nothing.
Okay.
You know, no same-sex recognition whatsoever.
No,
it's
have a good
sin.
life, nothing.
It's a sin. So I've had to broaden my continent of Australia to Oceania because I have 3 stories from Australia and New Zealand. And I'd like to start with a picture of a trailblazing transgender lawmaker, Georgina Beyer, who is dead at 65. And she was really a groundbreaker. She became the world's first openly transgender member of parliament. Friends said that she died peacefully in hospice care. They didn't say a cause of death, but she had suffered kidney failure and has undergone a kidney transplant. So she was a Maori, worked as a sex worker and nightclub performer before turning to politics. In 1995, she was elected mayor of a small North Island town of Carteret. 4 years later, she won national office and remained a lawmaker until 2007. She helped pass the landmark 2003 Prostitution Reform Act, which decriminalized sex work. I think of all people I have known in that area who have suffered because of the hypocrisy of our society, which on the one hand can accept prostitution, while on the other hand wants to push it under the carpet and keep it in the twilight world that it exists in, she told lawmakers. In 2004, she passed a law allowing same-sex civil unions. 9 years later, New Zealand passed a law allowing same-sex marriage. So politicians on both sides of the aisle mourned her death. Let's go to Mardi Gras in Sydney. And it's also World Pride. And I had a lot of pictures, but I already have too many. So I'll show you now the picture of Penny Wong. And unfortunately, I don't have her marching in the parade, but she did. She's significant for many reasons, including that she's Australia's first openly gay cabinet minister and the first to be of Asian descent. She has never marched until Mardi Gras until now, and of course the Prime Minister marched too. On Saturday, she joined the Rainbow Labour contingent at the parade, marching alongside fellow frontbenchers Tanya Pilbersack and Anthony Albanese. And Albanese, as you know, is the Prime Minister. I've been thinking about it for a while. I've probably got a bit more space now, haven't I, she said, explaining that life in opposition has freed up her diary, which I suppose is like calendar. And that her 2-year-old daughter, Alexandra, is now sleeping a bit more. It felt right to do it this year, and I'm really proud to be able to. Senator Wong first attended Mardi Gras as a spectator in her 20s when she was living in Sydney. So,
good for her.
My third story from Oceania involves a clip, so we can start with that right away. It's an Australian film that involving a Serbian-born Australian amateur ballroom dancer. It's called Of an Age, and it takes place in the summer of 1999, where a 17-year-old Serbian-born Australian amateur ballroom dancer experiences an unexpected and intense 24-hour romance with a friend's older brother. So let's look at a clip now of an Age.
I remember growing up, I was convinced I'd travel the world, just meet these mind-blowing people, connect.
Jesus, you're like 11.
I'm 18 in like 3 weeks.
Are you jaded yet? You jaded.
Shut up.
You're like my sister, is that it?
Ew. No, but we're more like really good friends.
Yeah, but he's tight.
Nights out with boys. I was not out with boys. I was with Cole. Cole is not boys.
I know she can be like a mess, but I don't really have any other friends.
You gotta play off the dramatic, don't you? Is this actually a dance costume? Sporting some serious cleavage.
What's all this?
It's all my ex's stuff.
Your ex is gonna kill me.
Oh, chill. He won't.
What's going on?
It's my going away dinner.
When are you flying?
Tomorrow. South America.
Fun. You probably just want to get to bed.
She was gonna go for a drive.
Can I come?
Go and walk you to your door. Promise me I'll meet someone. It's a beautiful boy.
What are the odds? We'll both be arriving right now. I'm a bitter old man these days.
Shut up.
You happy? Because for me, life froze. To this one feeling.
Well, there's another interesting film.
Yes.
The LGBTQ equivalent of Strictly Ballroom.
Very possibly.
One of my favorite films.
Okay, let's go to Europe. I don't have too many Europe stories.
Well, you had the Archdiocese, no, the
Yes, but that's
Canterbury.
the world story,
Yeah, okay.
because he was rejected by those 10 districts all over the world. But the European Court of Human Rights has made a decision concerning a French case concerning the French authorities' refusal to allow for the male gender marker of an applicant, an intersex person, to be replaced by neutral or intersex on the person's birth certificate. So this is kind of a backward decision on the part of the European Court of Human Rights. It held by 6 votes to 1 that there had been no violation of Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The court attributed to France wider discretion, gave high importance to the alleged public interests at stake, among which a need to preserve the consistency and reliability of civil status records. I mean, that's craziness, don't you think? A foolish consistency is the hobgoblin of little minds. I'm quoting an American transcendentalist there, but anyway, the decision argued that there were far-reaching consequences on the national legal system, along with an alleged lack of European consensus. So I hope that that's overturned, but that's the ruling. And then Bulgaria has banned gender reassignment. Transgender people are now banned from legally changing their gender in Bulgaria, according to the country's Supreme Court. which issued a ruling that is automatically binding on all other courts. Now the Supreme Court says that changing a person's legal gender also affects his relatives, like his children and his spouse. It ran the risk of legalizing ex post facto same-sex marriage, or children having same-sex parents, which is constitutionally impermissible. So they don't want people changing gender and then taking part in a same-sex relationship in Bulgaria. They're so afraid of marriage. So Europe has taken a rightward turn in my stories.
And did you check if they're part of the European Union?
I will check that while Keith is doing his stories.
Well, I was going to say, can we send them Texas and Florida to?
They can really have a...
They're probably triple the size.
There we go.
Shall I go on to Africa?
Why don't we let Keith and then we'll come back to you.
Okay. No, well, I imagine you have some stories
Yes.
too.
You have things to say?
I do.
I'm shocked. Okay, so this week's trivia, and thank you to Kim Ward for the email reminding us that March is Bi Health Month. This year's theme is Beyond Visibility, a focus on ensuring better health care, more inclusive services, healthier community spaces. So here's the question. When was the first time the term bisexual used? And has its meaning changed since then? And because you know I have to have a political slant to most of my trivia, who was the first openly bisexual elected official in the U.S.? And I didn't know the answers to any of that. So looking at events, Rainbow Umbrella, I'm liking the women's discussion group and the notes you're sending out. Book discussion groups, we won't ask Linda the name of the book, just know that it's entertaining reading and lively debate. Now,
And if you want to join, let us know.
Now a brief apology, because the two events I'm about to mention, one will be occurring as this show is first broadcast, and the next one you need to get up early on Sunday morning to go to. And this is because the Pride Center's events calendar was updated following our last taping, so that notice of these two events was not available. So, and you still have time. The Central Vermont Drag Ball, called Queer Icons, is happening as we speak at the Barry Old Labor Hall, and fortunately, tickets are available at the door. So you can stream us after the fact. Go have a good time. Momentum, Coffee and Chat, Sunday the 12th, 11 to noon at Rabble Rouser here in Montpelier. Now, a really interesting event, the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center. Did you see this? Now through April 16th, Keith Haring subway drawings.
Wow.
And on March 16th at 7 p.m., art historian Amy Ruffle will be there to discuss Keith Haring's work and his impact upon the arts community. And, you know, Keith Haring died in 1991 due to complications of AIDS. He was only 31 years old, so who knows what he could have created. Kellogg Hubbard Library, Monday, March 13th, 6:30 p.m. This is an in-person event. Uncertain Fruit, a memoir of infertility, loss, and love, is the story of two women in Vermont who find love with each other. While raising two boys from a previous relationship, they decide to add to their family. However, they are faced with infertility problems. They seek various ways to have a child and are given an opportunity to participate in a local private adoption. This event will include a brief reading by the authors, question and answer from the audience, as well as Representative Taylor Small discussing the legal hurdles that the LGBT plus community has regarding infertility treatment and adoption.
Who are the authors?
I interviewed them.
I was going to say that Their notice did not mention the author's name, so I didn't go out and look
Because
for
we
them.
interviewed them.
Yes.
Linda interviewed them
Yeah.
about that book.
Yeah, the very subject.
Monday,
Yeah.
you can.
And then
but-
they also spoke at the Stonewall Museum in Fort Lauderdale.
Oh,
So
right.
They're making the rounds.
Well, but I didn't include their names because they didn't in the notice, so I didn't know what the concern was. So,
Sounds like a good program.
exactly. Fox Market, East Montpelier, Saturday, March 25th at 8 p.m. Love Island. This is the queer dance party. And then starting on Friday, April 7th at 8 p.m., it will become a monthly event, Queer Speed Dating. You could leave Linda at home. We can go check it out. Vermont Humanities Council.
We don't move that fast.
You could stay in one place and they can come to you. So this is a hybrid event, and I'm putting it out there not because it's something we can participate in. This is specifically for our students. And it is a live stream conversation and in-person poetry reflections with Richard Blanco.
Oh, I
Yeah.
love his work.
Okay, so it's Friday, April 7th at 11:30 a.m. He was selected by President Obama as the 5th inaugural poet in U.S. history. He was the first Latino immigrant and gay person to serve in such a role. He was born in Madrid to Cuban exile parents, was raised in Miami. The negotiation of cultural identity characterizes his 4 collections of poetry, and they clearly say that the in-person event is limited to the Hartford High School students, but other students or other youth, you could stream this.
Nice.
So
We heard him read at the Unitarian Universalist
Yeah.
Church in Montpelier a few
Yeah.
years ago. He's really
he's
good.
amazing. But-
Yeah.
Okay, so that's my events, and I'll come back to the news afterwards.
All righty. Well, first we're going to go to Alaska, and then we're going to go to Florida. So,
I'm not sure which one is going to be the warmer. Yeah.
okay. On the advice of the state's attorney general, Alaska Civil Rights Agency quietly deleted language promising equal protection for LGBTQ Alaskans against most categories of discrimination. And it began refusing to investigate complaints. The executive director for the state commission co-wrote an essay describing the ruling as a sea change under Alaska law for LGBTQ people. Rights to be free from discrimination, but a year later the commission quietly reversed that position. It deleted language from the state's website promising equal protections for transgender and gay Alaskans against most categories of discrimination. And it began refusing to investigate complaints. Only employment-related complaints would now be accepted, and investigators dropped any non-employment LGBTQ civil rights cases they had been working on. So that's...
And nobody's heard about that. You know,
Yeah.
you hear about awful things that are happening in Florida
Yeah.
that you'll tell us, but
So there you go.
that's been under the radar.
Alaska.
That's creepy.
And now in Florida.
Yeah.
Ron DeSantis, new oversight board to control Disney's special task district called homosexuality evil last year and shared a baseless conspiracy theory that the tap water could make more people gay. Watch out for the water. On Monday,
Where do I buy the bottles?
yeah, really. On Monday, Ann's got it right there. On Monday, the Republican governor appointed Ron Perry, an Orlando-based former pastor and the CEO of The Gathering, a Christian ministry focused on outreach to men, as 1 in 5 people who will now oversee the Reedy Creek Improvement District. The governor's body that has given Disney unique powers in Central Florida for more than half a century. He will be signed in a bill in February that allowed him to replace the district's existing board. So we all know that, but at this point, which, and, you know, people are protesting there and trying to make a difference, but I think it's really, really hard. for
Well-
Florida people.
We were watching Joy Reid on MSNBC last night, and she made a really good point, which is that the other media are normalizing him.
Yeah.
And this fellow is a monster.
Yeah.
And he's not, a legitimate political
They're
candidate.
doing him as a mainstream
Right.
Republican, and he is
Right.
not a
Right.
mainstream Republican. And now we're going to go to Texas.
You're taking me to all the bad places.
A new Texas House bill provides property tax relief based on the size of family, excludes LGBTQ couples and divorced parents with children, among other parties, from getting the tax advantage. Texas House Bill 2889, introduced this week by State Representative Brian Slayton, Republican, would supply a homestead tax credit to certain married couples in the state with either biological or adopted children of any age. So. And then I'll report more on this if I have time, but the Fox News headline reads, Maryland mayor facing child porn charges, previously said Pete Buttigieg was his mentor.
Oh,
There we go. And now, as we know, Chicago ex-mayor Lori Lightfoot lost her chance to win in Chicago for mayor. And her term in office was plagued by persistent crime in the city, including a high murder rate and unceasing gun violence. So she will not be in the runoff for mayor of Chicago. I guess it's the first time an incumbent mayor in Chicago has not won.
Correct.
So, and Republican New York Congressman George Santos has co-sponsored, I know we're going from bad to worse. Republican New York Congressman George Santos has co-sponsored 2 resolutions in the U.S. House of Representatives. One that directly targets transgender women, a second that promises the AR-15 assault rifle as the national gun of America. House Resolution 115 and House Resolution 1095 were both introduced and co-signed by his fellow Republican lawmakers. H.R. 115, introduced by U.S. Representative Debbie Lesko, Republican, Arizona, seeks to implement a Women's Bill of Rights so that to reaffirm legal protections afforded to women under federal law. The resolution, however, directly challenges liberal gender norms by limiting the statute to biological difference between the sexes. So we have that good news. And I'll get back to this if I can, but here's the headline. On April 20th, 15-year-old Zachary Joseph Kirshner decided he was tired of being bullied, teased, and being the object of ridicule at Red Lion Senior High School in southwestern York County, PA. And he committed suicide, and there's a long article about him and his life, and we'll get back to that. You have something?
Well, no, April. We haven't reached April yet.
No, 2021.
Oh,
and this
okay.
is about
Thank you.
what his parents are doing.
In response
in
to
response,
to bring awareness. All right.
Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, who is a lesbian and Jewish, was one of the state officials threatened by a man who vowed to kill all the Jews in Michigan government if they don't leave office. The FBI has confirmed one was a target of the heavily armed defendant in this matter. Nessel tweeted Thursday, "It is my sincere hope that the federal authorities take this offense just as seriously as my hate crimes and domestic terrorist unit takes plots to murder elected officials." So, and just for a headline, a Republican state senator in Utah stands at odds with his fellow party members over protecting transgender children. We'll get to that if we have time. Right-wing commentator Michael Knowles of the Daily Wire said, transgenderism must be eradicated from public life entirely, Conservative Politician Action Conference on Saturday, he added that it would be for the good of society. The transphobic remark left the internet stunned and horrified, but was cheered at the Conservative Political Summit. So, and one more headline, and then we can move on. One state senator is holding up business in the Nebraska legislature in protest of a bill that would ban gender-affirming care for transgender youth. Michaela Kavanaugh, and this is a really good story of what she's doing there. So, Ann.
Well, I have one comment about the national gun law. We were watching our mentors at Gay USA, and Ann Northrop said, "Why do we need a national gun? That's craziness." So, that's one person's opinion, and I share it. What?
How else would you shoot LGBTQ people and people you don't like? And, you know.
Moving on.
Let's go on to Africa. Kenya, in a surprisingly affirmative move, said it's wrong to ban LGBTQ rights groups from registering, according to the Kenyan Supreme Court. At the same time, they stressed that gay sex remains illegal. The judges ruled in a 3-2 vote that the country's NGO board was wrong to stop the National Gay and Lesbian Human Rights Commission from registering. In 2013, as Kenya's highest court, the Supreme Court ruling cannot be overturned. So, but they want to make it, the ruling is bittersweet for Kenya's gay community because laws that were introduced under the British colonial rule mean that it's still criminal, that having gay sex is against the order of nature, which can result in up to 14 years in prison.
So I'm registering so you know how to find me.
The ruling comes at a time when homophobic rhetoric has been rising, and members of the LGBTQ community have been harassed by police, subjected to bodily examinations to prove gay sex, and openly insulted on social media and in public spaces. Some say they've been denied health care and thrown out of rental houses for being gay. On the day of the judgment, Member of Parliament George Peter Kaluma filed an official notice that he intended to introduce a bill that would jail for life people convicted of homosexuality or the promotion of it. While Friday's Supreme Court ruling arguably torpedoes any attempts to legally harass openly gay people with new laws, this Mr. Kaluma can still rally MPs for jail terms for gay sex. And in a similarly dismal circumstance, Uganda lawmaker introduces new anti-LGBTQ legislation. Now, you may recall that in 2014, the harsh anti-gay Kill the Gays law was annulled by a panel of judges. That it called for the death penalty for some homosexual acts. This new bill seeks to prohibit homosexuality, voicing widespread anti-gay sentiment that has peaked in recent days. This bill will punish promotion, recruitment, and funding related to LGBTQ activities. Most lawmakers in the parliamentary chamber in Uganda's capital, Kampala, stood up to show support for the bill. So, details were not forthcoming of specific provisions, but as you know, homosexuality is criminalized in more than 30 of those 54 countries. Let's move on to South America, where Aruba is in a court fight against same-sex marriage.
Who do we know that's going to Aruba?
We have friends whose parents have a timeshare in Aruba, and they're probably in Aruba right now. The Aruban government is filing a cassation appeal against the Curaçao Joint Court's ruling last December on the opening of same-sex marriage in Aruba and Curaçao. The Aruban government believes that the court sat in the government's chair with this ruling.
We feel that often.
Under current Aruba and Curacao legislation, marriage can only be between a man and a woman. However, the court ruled December 6th that the exclusion of same-sex marriages violates the prohibition of discrimination in government regulations. A bill is currently before the Aruban Parliament that would allow same-sex marriages. According to the government in Oranjestad, this is independent decision. This is an independent of the decision on the appeal. The government wants clarity on whether the way the court expresses its legislative task is correct. So, a little background. The Netherlands' 3 constituent countries in the Caribbean, Aruba, Curacao, and St. Martin, lack marriage equality.
Yeah.
While the Netherlands' 3 overseas municipalities in the Caribbean, Bonaire, Saba, and St. Eustatius, have marriage equality. So, Aruba's trying to fight it, but I hope they don't prevail. Now we have Asian news. Let's start with 2 Chinese university students who were disciplined over the rainbow flags that they put in the grocery store of the campus, town. They filed a lawsuit against the education ministry, and this is really an act of courage. They're 2 students at one of China's top universities who were disciplined last year for distributing rainbow flags on campus. They're only identified by their surnames Huang and Li. And they were given formal disciplinary warnings. They left 10 rainbow flags in the campus supermarket. They've been seeking to have the decision overturned since then. First, they appealed within the university, and then to the Beijing Municipal Education Commission, to no avail. They decided to file a lawsuit after the Ministry of Education dismissed their application for an administrative review earlier this month. The ministry said it does not fall within the scope of administrative consideration. So it's one of the few instances of lawsuits filed over the expression of support for LGBTQ rights on the mainland, where public discussion of the topic is considered sensitive and censored. Huang said they objected to the accusation of distributing unauthorized promotional material on campus because the charge had a negative impact. So let's hope they prevail.
Does it say anything how the other students responded? Was there a lot of support or?
No indication.
Okay.
I'll look further. But also in Asia, an Indonesian educator who is pictured before you, Shinya Ratri, dies at 60. And there's a picture now of her in 2022, and I'm sure I covered this. She's the leader of an Islamic boarding school that offers a haven for transgender women in Indonesia.
Yeah.
Yes.
I did cover it, yes. She died on February 1st in a city on the Indonesian island of Java. She was 60. A colleague at the school said the cause of death in the hospital was a heart attack. She had transitioned as a teenager, founded the school Pesantren Waria El Fatah in 2008, along with 2 colleagues, as a retreat and a place to pray. For transgender women in this largely Muslim nation, discrimination is particularly acute at mosques, where men and women generally pray separately. In the public mosque, we made people uncomfortable. We needed a safe place for trans women to pray, she told The Guardian in 2017. In here you can be in women's clothes or in men's clothes. It's up to you, she added. It depends on how comfortable you are. As many as 40 students at a time have attended the school, with several of them living there as boarders. They are taught prayers and comprehension of the Quran, and they join together in regular prayer services. Shinta was and still is the face of the Waria rights movement. She is all over the internet, said the founder of Queer, a podcast devoted to issues of gender. Transgender women in Indonesia are known as Waria, an appellation that combines the words for woman, wanita, and man, priya. Ms. Shinta's greatest contribution may have been spiritual guidance. More than 80% of Indonesians are Muslim, and although the religion takes a notably tolerant form there, militant Islam has been rising, and it has brought pressure on the government to become more rigid. And in addition, Indonesia has a new oppressive criminal code with vague provisions that open the door to invasions of privacy and selective enforcement.
We're going to have to move on.
Can I just, this is my last story.
Okay.
Israeli children by surrogacy to be allowed for same-sex couples, single men, beginning next week. And I have a picture now before you. Itai Pinkas and Yoav Arad, a gay couple who petitioned the Supreme Court requesting to have a baby through a surrogate mother, and that request has been granted, and other people can have
A lot
children.
of a lot of big demonstrations going on in Israel right now.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there.
They should come to the Kellogg Hubbard Library presentation to see what they can learn about. But so we're going to start off with our usual Becca Watch. And anyone who followed the news recently, the U.S. Supreme Court hearing the cases regarding if the Biden administration does or does not have the authority for student loan forgiveness. And there was a large demonstration out in front of the U.S. Supreme Court, and guess who was one of the keynote speakers? Talking about the positive impact that this would have upon, people really trying to get ahead. And one of the comments was made, refuting, student loan forgiveness is, well, what if I had already paid all of my bills? What if I have no loan to forgive? Well, our system is not equitable to begin with. So offering assistance to those in needs would seem to be the action to take. But that's just me.
Well, then
And apparently Becca, but there were...
And then you get Fox News saying, look, what am I going to give money back to someone who decided to take art history?
Yes, thank you. So the March 1st Washington Blade
Oh, I was
had
trying
a
to remember.
wonderful article with, oh my, an interview with Becca Balland, where Becca said, okay, what we should be focusing on, on issues from the curriculum taught in school to trans America's access to health care, Democrats should focus their message on how their opponents' policies proposals would threaten personal freedoms. And her comment was, we don't like being told what to do as Americans, particularly Vermonters. Regardless of whether folks identify as liberal or conservatives, whether they live in a rural or urban area, we don't want to be told what we can and can't learn, what we can and can't talk about. Government intrusion and overreach into otherwise private matters concerning healthcare education has been the hallmark of policies enacted by GOP leaders. We need to call them on what they're doing and then say, these are the things that we have enacted.
The old party.
And there's a great picture of her on the cover.
Exactly. So, related. And I'm going to approach this from a slightly different angle. The same day as the Victory Institute gathering to recognize that Vermont has the second highest number of out LGBTQ plus elected officials in the country, there was also released a story about Nishad Singh, who is the former FTX executive, pleading guilty to the corruption charges that they took money from their investors, created a political action committee, and then inappropriately used the funds. The story in the mainstream media tries to focus on the fact that Becca's campaign benefited from this $1 million donation that was made by Singh to the Victory Fund. Now, the Victory Fund at the time did not know the source of the monies. They just, and this is one of the problems with our current election laws, is you can create a political action committee. You can donate large sums of money. You do not have to disclose the source, and then you can go out and use it any way you want. Becca knew nothing about where the money was coming from. She did not ask for them to be involved. The Victory Fund chose to use the monies because they looked at her campaign as being an opportunity to advance the LGBTQ plus community. And it was only after the fact that people realized the source of the money and how they had really been deceived and been used in the process, because the federal campaign finance laws allowed it. Rather than focusing on one campaign, we should be focusing on the process. Why is it that I could donate large sums of money that I can then just go out and use without oversight and without accountability? So,
And put it in my bank account.
there we go. So, but on a more positive election note, by the time this airs, Winooski, Vermont will be the third all LGBTQ plus city council in the U.S.
Yeah.
There are 2 incumbents that were not up for re-election. The open seats are uncontested. So, congratulations, Winooski. And then another story that's been receiving that we reported on peripherally on our last show. Vermont high school girls basketball team forfeited
Yep.
being in the state tournament. And when they wrote to the Headmasters Association, they merely said they were withdrawing. After the fact, they said it was because they would be playing against a team with a transgender student. So, and this was Mid-Vermont Christian School, which is one of the 2 that are asking for state dollars, but don't want to have to comply with Vermont non-discrimination statute if it complies with the doctrine of their faith. And they said, we withdrew from the tournament because we believe playing against an opponent with a biological male jeopardizes the fairness of the game and the safety of our players. Now, to their credit, the response from the Vermont Principals Association was, in response to a recent news of a Vermont school opting to forfeit a basketball game in this year's tournament, the VPA reiterates its support for each student. The VPA is committed to providing all students with the opportunity to participate in VPA activities in a manner consistent with their gender identity, as is outlined in the Vermont Agency of Education's best practices. The prohibition against discrimination includes discrimination based on a student's actual or perceived sex and gender. Good for them. And related to that, the bill that has been introduced into the House, H268, in its in-house education, would strengthen the anti-discrimination requirements for a private school to receive tuition dollars and increase state oversight. And very quickly, because Linda has things that she wants to say, the legislature is on vacation this week because of town meeting day, going out meeting with constituents in their districts. But when they come back, it'll be crossover week, which means bills have to make it from one chamber to the other to be guaranteed debate during this year of the session. And in the House, there are 463 bills that have been introduced. Only 22 of them have passed out of the House. In the Senate, they have had 121 bills introduced. Only 9 of them have passed out of the chamber, and there's only 4 that have passed both chambers, one of which was budget adjustment, which they had to do, and the other was regulations regarding how town meetings would be conducted and the options available. So that had to happen. So the things that we're going to be watching is, the bill about tuition. We're going to be watching about protected health care, which has made it out of the House and is in the Senate. The Senate version is in their Appropriations Committee. The complement bill in the Senate is in their Appropriations Committee because they're dollar amounts. However, one of the bills that has passed out of the Senate, which will make Ann happy, is their bill regarding firearms.
Good. I hope it's good.
And putting us in compliance with all of the federal laws that Vermont has not adopted into our statutes. So, however, one of the things that they didn't include was Vermonters under 21 obtaining semi-automatic weapons, but that's because Vermont already prohibits those under 21 from purchasing any guns, and the straw purchases is one of the elements that is included in this bill, so that would cover that.
So there you go.
Well,
You're going to be busy.
And there is language in Legislative Council about that rumored constitutional amendment. So that we may have a draft to report on our next show.
Good. And let's go to Michaela Cavanaugh, one of our heroes. She is a Democrat from Ohio and has vowed to keep up a filibuster in a one-chamber legislature to stop the bill from passing. It's an anti-trans bill. She began it Thursday night in an old-fashioned way, speaking for as long as possible. Kavanaugh promised to take every single bill to closure, meaning hours of debate on every single bill that comes to the floor. If this legislature collectively decides that legislating hate against children is our priority, then I'm going to make it painful. Painful for everyone. Kavanaugh said in a meeting Thursday that was recorded by various news reports, if you want to inflict pain upon our children, I am going to inflict pain upon this body, and I have nothing but time. And I am going to use all of it. She further vowed, I will burn the session to the ground over this bill.
All right.
So good
Sister.
for her. Yeah.
I refuse to yield the floor.
And yet she persisted.
Yes. And then on a sad note, Achibi Betty Powell, an activist with the Asteria Lesbian Foundation for Justice, was originally called the National Gay, now LGBTQ Task Force, has died at 82.
I think it's Estrella.
Estrella, thank you. Powell died last Tuesday, according to a press release from the two organizations. She was one of the first black women to have leadership role in what we then called the lesbian and gay liberation movement of the 1970s. She was a founding mother, as the press release calls her, of the Lesbian Foundation for Justice, and remained active in organization for the last 45 years. She was among a small group of multicultural, multi-class feminist activists who came together in 1977 to create a new way of bringing resources to the movement, led by lesbians and women of color, to, in her words, generate the justice that our communities need right here, right now. So she will be missed. And Iowans, by the hundreds, rallied Sunday at the center of Iowa government to protest legislation targeting the rights of LGBTQ citizens. Nearly 1,000 parents, students, and educators, faith leaders, community organizers, and elected officials attended the Sunday rally to resist the west steps of the Iowa state capitol. Iowans have had enough. We understand that our friends, neighbors, and family members are under attack and their rights are being stripped away. And as Iowans, we are unified against anti-LGBTQ bills. So that's good. And there was a black transgender woman killed in Milwaukee. Cachet Henderson is at least the third transgender woman in Milwaukee to be killed in the last 9 months. I mean, it's just outrageous. Let's see. What we have here. This is a part of your Times thing, I think, Ann.
Oh, good. Can you pass it over? They're my key points I was going to make.
Okay, let me just do a few things here
Well, you had several stories that you
Yes.
wanted to go back to.
that I wanted to get back to. Oh, yeah. I think I did this one, yeah. The Fox News headline read, Maryland mayor faces child porn charges. Previously said Pete Buttigieg was his mentor. Anyone with more than 3 brain cells knows that Fox News is a right-wing propaganda arm of the Republican Party that is losing viewers in droves, even to more unhinged outlets spouting anti-American conspiracy theories. So we have become accustomed to Fox lies, but today's attack on Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg is so grotesque that the normal response of ignoring their nonsense must be set aside. The story refers to gay College Park, Maryland Mayor Patrick Wojahn, who resigned this week and was arrested on 56 child pornography. It's a shocking and sad story and plays into the worst slurs about the LGBT community. And Fox News is leading the homophobic charge. So he's blaming Pete. And then there's a story about Zachary Joseph Kirshner decided he had enough of being bullied, teased, and being the object of ridicule at Red Lion Senior High School in southwestern York County, Pennsylvania. The action he took next has left a raw and deep, never-healing wound in his family and among his friends, and he died as a result of suicide. In a lovingly crafted obituary by his grieving parents, the openly gay freshman high school student was described as having an amazing smile, and he loved to make everyone laugh. And even if you were having a bad day, he would make you smile. He had autism. He was high functioning, and he had dreams of attending UCLA. He was an amazing gymnast and loved skiing in the winter and riding roller coasters in the summer. Now, nearly 2 years later, his mother has filed a lawsuit in the U.S. District Court for the Middle District of Pennsylvania in Harrisburg against the Red Lion Area District School staff and faculty, specifically school guidance counselor Jason Hoffman and the school's resource police officer Mark Greenlee, who has since retired from law enforcement, alleging they did absolutely nothing to prevent the torment that led to their son's suicide. So.
And unfortunately, that's the scenario we keep hearing over and over again from our youth.
You know, and especially in places where they, make this a priority.
Can I have a minute for the New York Times?
Well, okay, but let me just look at one more. See if I have everything I was going to get. Yes, you may.
Bulgaria is in the European Union.
You may. Oh, thank you.
Okay.
I just have 3 quick points. I told you last time a few erroneous things. For example, the GLAAD is the GLAAD media organization that is objecting to this, and Pamela Paul, as we know, wrote the letter about J.K. Rowling. Among those who signed the letter were several New York Times employees. The News Guild of New York says members have been called into investigatory meetings, and an informed source says that disciplinary proceedings are underway for those Times staff members.
Okay, and we got to move on because he's got to do his trivia, and we have 2 minutes left.
Okay, Keith. Well,
Can you bring this up again next time, maybe?
why, sure.
All right.
Was there any doubt? Okay, so the term bisexual, first recorded use was in 1793. However, it referred to possessing characters of both sexes at the same time. It wasn't until 1892 when there was a translation of Psychopathia Sexualis that bisexual took on what we now think of as its current meaning and use. The first openly bisexual elected official in the U.S. wasn't until 1997, and it was the Connecticut House of Representatives, Representative Evelyn Mantilla.
I don't know her.
Neither do I. And my passing comment was, frequently when someone would make a disclosure about being gay, lesbian, whatever, and they were coming out of a traditional heterosexual relationship, they were defined as lesbian or gay. The term bisexual was never included in the conversation. So we still got work to do.
Yes.
And
so I suggest we all be like Michaela Cavanaugh and resist.